I woke to a vibration. My phone, glowing harsh in the darkness. It was 3:33 a.m. Nobody texts at 3:33 in the morning unless something is seriously wrong. My heart jumped before my brain fully woke up. The message was from Callahan, my manager. He never texted outside work hours. Never. We had that unspoken boundary. Work stays at work, life stays separate. Seeing his name on my screen at this hour made my chest tighten instantly. Stay home tomorrow. Don't walk into the office. HR's about to make a terrible mistake at 9 a.m. sharp.
No explanation.
No details. Just a stark warning delivered like a bomb. My chest constricted. My pulse jumped from sleepy to racing in seconds. I'd noticed strange things happening at work recently. Phantom emails appearing under my name, missing approvals I definitely remembered submitting, projects I'd never touched suddenly attributed to me. But this message felt different. This wasn't office politics or technical glitches. This was direct, immediate danger. I tried calling Callahan back immediately. Straight to voicemail. His phone was off, which was even more unsettling. I sat up in the dark, staring at that glowing screen, trying to control my breathing. Something major was happening. Something that threatened me specifically. And it definitely wasn't small. Work had felt wrong for weeks now, but I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. Small things at first. Approvals showing up in the system that I never actually made. Reports with my name attached that I'd never written or even seen before. Emails mysteriously disappearing from my outbox after I'd sent them. Customer complaints from people I'd never interacted with. At first, I genuinely thought it was just typical office politics. Maybe Tamsin was behind some of it. She had a particular talent for smiling sweetly while quietly cutting people down behind their backs. She'd done it to others before, always managing to look innocent. But the patterns I was seeing were too precise, too carefully calculated and timed, too systematic to be random petty sabotage. Someone wasn't just making my life difficult. Someone was methodically building a case against me, constructing a narrative. And I was apparently the villain in their story. I just hadn't realized until this moment how serious it actually was. How much danger I was really in. Callahan's message made it brutally clear. This wasn't about making me uncomfortable. This was about destroying me professionally. I pulled my laptop onto my bed, suddenly wide awake despite the early hour. If someone was building a case against me, I needed to understand exactly what I was facing. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't see from my position, was that the company's board of directors desperately needed a scapegoat. They needed someone to blame, and they'd already chosen me. Millions of dollars had mysteriously disappeared over the last quarter. Vendor payments that went to wrong accounts. Software licenses purchased, but never delivered. Cloud infrastructure costs that didn't match actual usage. All of it carefully rerouted and disguised to look legitimate. External auditors were coming next week. Shareholders were asking increasingly aggressive questions at board meetings. Regulators were starting to sniff around. The pressure was mounting from every direction. They needed a name to pin it on. A face to show the auditors. Someone relatively junior, but senior enough to have access. Someone expendable. They needed a fall guy. And apparently, they decided that fall guy would be me. And they had powerful help from the inside. HR and Tamsin were working together, quietly painting me as guilty, building a narrative of incompetence and possible fraud. Documents were being created, backdated, and filed. Evidence was being manufactured while I slept. I didn't know any of this sitting in my dark bedroom. But Callahan had pieced it together. And somehow, in the middle of the night, he'd decided to warn me. Callahan himself hadn't been investigating me specifically. At first, he'd just noticed strange anomalies in our department's records. Approvals that didn't match our usual patterns. Budget allocations that seemed odd. Access logs that didn't make sense. He thought the entire department might be under some kind of threat or audit. So he'd started investigating quietly on his own time, trying to protect the unit we'd built together, trying to preserve our team's reputation and work. Not me personally. Not anyone specific. Just the work we'd all built, the systems we'd created, the reputation of our department. He was protecting his legacy as much as anything. But sometime in the hours before that 3:33 a.m. text, he'd realized the truth. All those anomalies, all those strange patterns, they weren't random. They were all being attributed to one person. They were all pointing at me like arrows at a target. That's when he'd sent the message. Not because we were friends, we weren't particularly. Not because he cared about me personally, he barely knew me outside work. But because he'd recognized an injustice being constructed, and something in him couldn't let it proceed without at least warning me. The question was, what could I possibly do with just a few hours' notice? Minutes after that first cryptic text, my phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. From Callahan's personal account, not his work email. The subject line was blank, which immediately felt significant. Attached was a locked folder. Password protected. No explanation in the email body. No subject line. No message at all. Just that single encrypted attachment. My hands shook slightly as I tried different passwords. His name. Our department code. Common passwords. Nothing worked. Then I noticed a second text had come through. Your employee ID backwards. I typed it in. The folder opened. Inside were dozens of files. Logs, emails, internal documents. I started reading and my blood ran cold. This was a complete map of the conspiracy against me. Vendor approvals that supposedly came from my account, but the actual system logs showed they'd originated from executive-level access points, not my workstation. HR draft documents for my termination, dated 3 days before the incidents they supposedly referenced, which was literally impossible. Compliance files labeled containment, MK, my initials. Chat messages between Tamsin and someone in HR, carefully feeding and building the narrative against me. They weren't just trying to fire me quietly. They were building me into a criminal, a fraud, a scapegoat for millions in missing money. I spent the next 2 hours going over every file Callahan had sent, reading each timestamp, examining each log entry, analyzing each email thread. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't random. This wasn't even opportunistic. This was deliberate orchestration. Someone high up had decided I would take the fall, and they'd enlisted help to make it happen. Tamsin wasn't the mastermind. She didn't have that kind of power. She was just the eager helper, the office politician who saw an opportunity to eliminate someone she viewed as competition. But someone above her, someone with real authority, had initiated this. Someone who could access executive systems. Someone who could manipulate HR. Someone who could create and backdate official documents. Instead of panicking, I felt something else. Clarity. Focus. I could see the battlefield now. I understood the weapons being used against me. And that meant I could fight back. I wasn't helpless. I was just outnumbered. There's a difference. Over the next hour, I started tracing the logs more carefully, confirming access points, identifying patterns. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to turn their own plan directly against them. I began building a mental map, who had done what, when, and why. Each move they'd made. Each hole in their story. Each weakness I could potentially exploit. By 4 a.m., I had a plan forming. It wasn't complete yet, but the outline was there. The key wasn't to defend myself emotionally or argue my innocence in some HR meeting. The key was evidence. Cold, digital, time-stamped, undeniable evidence. I pulled out my personal laptop, not my work computer, which they might be monitoring. I started preparing evidence packages. Carefully organized folders. Screenshots with timestamps visible. Log files showing the real source of those fraudulent approvals. Email metadata proving I couldn't have sent what they claimed I sent. I worked methodically, documenting everything. Creating a timeline that told the true story. Showing not just my innocence, but their guilt. I wasn't just going to prove I didn't do it. I was going to prove exactly who did. I felt strangely calm. Focused in a way I'd never experienced before. This was survival mode, but it was also something else. It was the clarity that comes when you finally see the truth and can act on it. By 6 a.m., I had compiled everything I needed. All the logs disproving my involvement. Timestamp evidence proving physical impossibility. I literally couldn't have made those approvals because I wasn't even logged into the system at those times. Clear connections between executive-level access and the falsified data. And perhaps most damning, evidence of Tamsin's complicity in feeding the false narrative to HR. Everything was ready. The evidence was organized, backed up in 3 different places, ready to deploy. Now I just had to wait. The hardest part of any plan is waiting while others act. The tension was unbearable but controlled. I made coffee, took a shower, dressed carefully, not for the office, since Callahan had told me to stay home, but for whatever might come next. I needed to look and feel professional, composed, in control. I checked my phone obsessively. At 7:45 a.m., another message from Callahan appeared. Trust the evidence. They're expecting you to walk in clueless and defensive. Don't give them what they expect. I realized something then. Callahan wasn't saving me out of personal loyalty or friendship. We barely knew each other outside department meetings. He was protecting the unit, the work, the integrity of our systems. The fact that saving the department also meant saving me was secondary to him. I appreciated the honesty of that. The clarity. He wasn't a hero rescuing me. He was a professional protecting his domain. And I happened to be part of that domain. It made his help feel more real somehow. More trustworthy. Because it wasn't based on emotion or personal connection. It was based on principle and facts. At 8:55 a.m., a calendar invite appeared in my personal email. Subject: Mandatory Compliance Discussion. 9 a.m. sharp. Conference Room B. They were ready. Ready to ambush me. Ready to fire me for fraud, to terminate my career, to possibly even press charges. The meeting was set. HR would be there. Probably company lawyers. Maybe even executives who'd helped frame me. If I'd walked in this morning like normal, I would have been blindsided. Defensive. Confused. Easy to manipulate and railroad. That's what they were counting on. Shock and confusion making me an easy target. I didn't respond to the meeting invite. Didn't decline it, didn't accept it. Just left it hanging there, unanswered. Let them wonder where I was. At exactly 9 a.m., while they were presumably gathering in that conference room looking for me, Callahan sent an email. I watched it arrive in my inbox simultaneously with my work email on my laptop. Subject line: Immediate suspension of termination proceedings. Audit interference detected/external escalation initiated. CC'd on the email: external forensic auditors, cybersecurity consultants, legal compliance, and most significantly, the CEO herself. Attached to the email were the files. All the evidence of the frame-up. The logs. The impossibilities. The executive access points. Tamsin's messages. Everything. I imagine the chaos erupting in that conference room. The confusion. The panic. The hunters suddenly realizing they'd become the hunted. By 9:30 a.m., my phone was buzzing constantly. Not calls to me. I was staying silent, but notifications from my work email showing absolute chaos unfolding. Emergency meetings being scheduled. People being pulled into different conference rooms. Executives scrambling. HR was in full panic mode, according to the email threads I could see. All the logs they'd built their case on were being examined by external auditors. Every piece of evidence against me was collapsing under scrutiny. The narrative they'd spent weeks building was unraveling in real time. And they couldn't stop it. They couldn't hide it. Callahan had CC'd too many external parties. The exposure was public within the company now. By 10 a.m., the consequences were rolling in fast. 2 senior executives were immediately locked out of all systems pending investigation. The finance director was placed on immediate investigative leave. HR was frozen from taking any personnel actions until the audit was complete. And Tamsin. I saw her name on an email about evidence tampering and false statements. She was officially flagged for investigation. I sat in my apartment, watching it all unfold remotely through email notifications and a few texts from shocked coworkers. I wasn't celebrating. I was calm, composed, just watching the exposure happen methodically, piece by piece. This was what justice looked like, apparently. Not loud, Not dramatic. Just consequences catching up with actions. I thought about Tamsin as I watched her professional life implode via email threads. About HR staff who'd helped build false cases. About executives who decided I was expendable enough to destroy. I'd been a pawn in their game. A target. A convenient scapegoat for their bigger problems. Someone without enough power to fight back effectively, or so they'd thought. Now they were the ones exposed. Their actions visible. Their conspiracy documented and distributed to people who mattered. No words from me. No drama.
No emotional confrontations.
Just consequences flowing naturally from their own choices. The phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. It rang again. Different unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. They wanted to control the narrative, to spin this, to manage the damage. I wasn't giving them that opportunity. At 11 a.m., I received an official email from the CEO's office directly. Brief. Professional. Please make yourself available for a call at 2 p.m. today. We need your assistance with an urgent matter. Not a termination. Not a disciplinary meeting. A request for assistance. The power dynamic had completely flipped in less than 3 hours. Instead of defending myself against false charges, I was being asked to help with the investigation. To assist with forensic reconstruction. To help expose the conspiracy that had targeted me. The 2 p.m. call was surreal. The CEO herself, the head of legal, the external forensic auditor, and Callahan. They asked me to walk them through my evidence, to explain the logs, to help them trace the real perpetrators. I did it calmly, professionally, explaining timestamps, access points, system permissions, showing them exactly how the fraud had been committed and then how it had been pinned on me. I wasn't emotional, wasn't accusatory, just factual. By the end of the call, the legal team was already drafting actions against the executives involved. The CEO looked exhausted and angry, not at me, but at the situation. "I'm sorry this happened," she said simply. "We'll make this right." I appreciated that she didn't try to over-apologize or make excuses. Just acknowledged it and committed to action. That felt more real than elaborate apologies would have. Callahan stayed silent through most of the call, only speaking when asked technical questions. When we hung up, he sent me a private message. "You handled that perfectly. Most people would have gotten emotional. You didn't." I realized that was probably the highest compliment he knew how to give. The girl they'd tried to bury was now supervising the excavation of their conspiracy. The target had become the expert witness. The scapegoat had become the investigator. 48 hours later, something unexpected happened. Callahan resigned.
No dramatic announcement.
No big speech. Just a quiet resignation letter submitted to HR and the CEO. Effective immediately. I was shocked. He'd just helped expose a major fraud. He'd saved the department and me. Why leave now, right when he'd be recognized and probably rewarded for his integrity? He sent me a private message that evening. "You weren't the target originally until suddenly you were. I saw it just in time. But I can't work in a system that almost let this happen. The structure that enabled this is still there. I'm done." He didn't seek recognition for what he'd done. Didn't ask for thanks or acknowledgement. Didn't try to leverage his whistleblowing into a promotion. He just quietly walked away from the entire situation. I respected that more than I could articulate. He'd done the right thing, but he wasn't interested in being celebrated for it. He just wanted out of a system he no longer trusted. I never saw him again after that. No goodbye coffee, no farewell email. He just vanished from my professional life as quickly as he'd entered it with that 3:33 a.m. warning. But I never forgot what he'd done. Or, more importantly, what he'd taught me. That doing the right thing doesn't require friendship or personal connection. It just requires recognizing injustice and acting on principle. Weeks turned into months. The investigation continued. More people were implicated. The fraud was bigger than anyone had initially realized. Millions missing, multiple executives involved, a whole network of corruption that had existed for years. I was asked to stay on and help rebuild the department's systems and procedures. They offered me Callahan's old position, manager of the unit. I accepted. Not because I wanted the promotion particularly, but because I wanted to prevent this from ever happening again. I implemented new controls, new checks and balances, new transparency measures. Made it harder for anyone to manipulate the systems the way they'd been manipulated. Tamsin, meanwhile, tried desperately to resurrect her career. I heard through the office grapevine that she was having coffee meetings with people across the company, networking events, offering careful apologies disguised as explanations. I was just doing what I was told. I didn't understand the full picture. I thought I was helping. I ignored all of it completely. She reached out to me twice, once via email, once through a mutual colleague. I didn't respond to either attempt. She wasn't worth my energy or attention. Some people don't deserve engagement, even for closure. I had better things to do than help her feel better about her choices. She'd made her decisions. Now she could live with the consequences. The thing about consequences is they don't always come as dramatic fireworks. Sometimes they're quiet. Sometimes they're just absence. Tamsin wasn't fired with a public announcement. She wasn't arrested or charged with anything. She just became increasingly irrelevant. People stopped including her in meetings, stopped asking her opinion, stopped considering her for projects. She technically still worked there for a few more months, but she was essentially a ghost. Invisible, excluded from anything that mattered. Eventually, she resigned. I heard she took a job at a much smaller company, several steps down from where she'd been. That felt like appropriate justice. Not dramatic, not explosive, just quiet diminishment. The natural result of betraying trust and participating in fraud. The executives who'd orchestrated the whole thing faced more severe consequences. 2 were terminated and faced potential criminal charges. 1 took a plea deal and testified against the others. The CFO resigned rather than be fired and face investigation. I watched it all unfold from my new position as manager. I stayed professional through it all.
Composed.
Focused on rebuilding what had been damaged. But internally, yes, I smiled. I had survived something designed to destroy me, and they hadn't survived their own plot. I never yelled during any of it. Never sent angry emails. Never publicly called anyone out. Never made dramatic accusations in meetings. I never needed to. The evidence spoke for itself. The facts told the story. Truth applied methodically, quietly, and completely. And the impact? That was loud enough. The entire company restructured its compliance department. New executive oversight was implemented. External audits became standard. The scandal made industry news, not with my name attached, thankfully, but as a cautionary tale about corporate fraud. I learned something important through all of it. Competence, intelligence, and calm strategy beat arrogance and cruelty every single time. Eventually, the people who plotted against me learned that lesson the hard way. Without noise, without spectacle. I saw the final audit reports, watched the new policies get implemented, observed the executives being held accountable, noted the HR department being completely reorganized with new leadership. I stayed professional throughout it all, stayed composed, helped implement changes without gloating or making it personal. But internally, I acknowledged what had happened. I had survived, and they hadn't. That was enough. The new CEO, they'd hired someone from outside to clean house, asked to meet with me personally. She thanked me for my help with the investigation and rebuilding, asked if there was anything the company could do to make up for what had happened. I thought about her question. What could make up for weeks of fear? For knowing people were actively trying to destroy my career and possibly put me in legal jeopardy? For the stress of that 3:33 a.m. text and everything that followed? Make sure it never happens again, I said. Make the system strong enough that one person's vendetta can't destroy someone else. That's what I want. She nodded slowly. We're working on exactly that. Your recommendations are being implemented across all departments. That felt like enough. Not full justice, maybe. Nothing could give me back those weeks of paranoia and fear. But forward-looking justice. Preventative justice. Making sure the next person in my position would have protections I hadn't had. I kept my father's advice close. Control what you can. Accept what you can't. know the difference. I couldn't change what they'd tried to do to me, but I could change what happened next. I could build systems that protected the next target. That was something. Months later, I received a message through LinkedIn.
Callahan.
His first contact since that final private message. Saw the policy changes. Good work. You made it better than it was. That matters.
Short. Direct. Pure Callahan.
I smiled reading it. I didn't need him to be more effusive. That message was perfect for who he was.
I thought sometimes about that night.
That 3:33 a.m. text that changed everything. How different my life would be if Callahan hadn't warned me. If I'd walked into that office at 9 a.m. unprepared and confused. I would have been fired. Probably blacklisted in the industry. Maybe face legal charges for fraud I didn't commit. My career would be over. My reputation destroyed. All because I'd been a convenient target for people more powerful than me. But that's not what happened. Because one person, who barely knew me, who had no personal loyalty to me, decided that injustice mattered more than convenience. Decided that warning me was worth the professional risk to himself.
I learned not to be cynical about people.
Yes, Tamsin and those executives were corrupt and willing to destroy someone innocent. But Callahan existed too. Integrity existed. People who did the right thing for no reward existed. Both realities were true. The world contained both kinds of people. And maybe the measure of a good life was trying to be the second kind more often than the first. I'd never be as purely principled as Callahan.
I was more complicated than that.
But I could try to do right when it mattered. Try to warn someone else if I ever saw them being targeted unjustly. That seemed like enough of a goal. A year after it all happened, I was invited to speak at an industry conference about corporate fraud prevention. I almost said no. I didn't want to be defined by what had happened to me. But then I thought about someone in the audience who might be living through something similar right now. Someone being framed. Someone scared and alone. I said yes. I told a story, not naming names, not making it personal, just explaining the patterns. How fraud often requires a scapegoat. How systems can be manipulated. How important documentation and evidence are. After the talk, 3 people approached me separately. Each one told me they were facing something similar right now. They asked for advice. I gave them what I could, practical steps, documentation strategies, who to trust and who to question. One woman was crying. I thought I was going crazy, she said. Everyone said I was paranoid. But you're describing exactly what's happening to me. You're not crazy, I told her. Document everything. Build your evidence file. And find your Callahan, someone principled who can see past the narrative they're building.
She thanked me.
I never knew if my advice helped her or what happened with her situation. But I hoped it did. I hoped she had her own 3:33 a.m. warning from someone. I hoped she survived it like I had. I thought about Callahan's final note to me sometimes. You weren't the target until you were. The system almost ate you, but you navigated it. That's all you need to know.
No applause. No celebration.
Just quiet acknowledgement of survival. That felt right. This wasn't a story about heroism or victory. It was a story about survival and adaptation. About recognizing danger and responding strategically rather than emotionally. I'd learned that survival isn't pretty. It doesn't feel good while it's happening. You don't get to be righteously angry in a moment. You have to stay calm and focused. The satisfaction comes later. The justice comes slowly. But it does come. The company was better now than it had been. The systems were stronger. The oversight was real. Would it prevent all future corruption? Probably not. But it would make the next attempt harder. Make the next person who tried to scapegoat someone face more resistance. That was progress. Small, incremental, unglamorous progress. But progress nonetheless. I stayed in my position for 2 more years. Built a good team. Mentored people who reminded me of myself. Quiet, competent, easy to overlook. I taught them to document everything. To trust facts over narratives. To stay calm when targeted. 3 of my ments went on to senior positions in other companies. They remembered what I taught them. They built strong systems wherever they went. That ripple effect, that felt like the real victory. Eventually, I moved on to a different company. A better opportunity, more responsibility, more money. The scandal from my old company followed me in some ways. People in the industry knew about it, knew I'd been targeted and survived.
Some saw it as a red flag.
Others saw it as proof of character. The CEO who hired me said, "Anyone can succeed when everything goes right. I want people who know how to handle catastrophe." That's why she hired me. Not despite what happened, but partially because of it. I built similar strong systems in the new company. Same protections. Same documentation requirements. Same oversight. My new colleagues sometimes complained it was too much bureaucracy. "Don't you trust us?" they'd ask. "It's not about trust," I'd explain. "It's about making it hard for one bad actor to do massive damage. These systems protect you as much as they protect the company." Most people got it eventually. A few never did. Those few usually weren't people I wanted to work with long-term anyway. Because the ones who complained loudest about oversight were often the ones who needed oversight most. I was good at my job. Really good. Not because of any special talent, but because I understood systems and vulnerabilities. I knew how fraud happened because I'd been its target. I knew how innocent people got framed because I'd nearly been destroyed by it. 5 years after that 3:33 a.m. text, I ran into Tamsin. Completely by accident. A coffee shop near my office. She was in line ahead of me. Our eyes met. She went pale. "Hi," she said quietly. I nodded. Silence. Awkward and heavy. She swallowed.
"I'm sorry for what I did."
I was ambitious and stupid, and I didn't think about. "It's fine," I interrupted. Not because I forgave her, but because I genuinely didn't care anymore. She wasn't important enough to my life to hold a grudge against. "Is it really?" she asked. "Fine, I mean."
"For me, yes."
"I don't know about you." She flinched. I got my coffee and left.
No dramatic confrontation.
No satisfaction from her apology. Just indifference. She'd become irrelevant to my story. That felt like the truest form of moving on. Not forgiveness, not revenge. Just irrelevance. She didn't matter enough to think about anymore. I had better things to do. Better problems to solve. Better systems to build. I never saw her again after that. I didn't Google her or check her LinkedIn or ask mutual acquaintances about her. She simply stopped existing in my awareness. That, I think, was the best possible outcome. I got married eventually. To someone who had nothing to do with corporate world. A teacher. Kind, steady, interested in completely different things. He knew my story. I told him on our third date because it felt important he understand something fundamental about me. "You're a survivor," he said after I finished. "That's the word for people like you." I'd never thought of myself that way. Survivor felt too dramatic. But maybe he was right. I had survived something designed to destroy me. Had survived and then thrived. Built something better from the wreckage. We had kids. 2 daughters. I taught them early. Document important things, trust facts over feelings in crisis situations, stay calm when everyone else panics. My husband thought I was making them paranoid. "They're 6 and 8, he'd protest. "Do they really need lessons in evidence gathering?" "They need to know the world isn't always fair," I said. "And they need to know they can survive unfairness if they're smart about it." He couldn't argue with that. I never told them the full story of what happened to me. They were too young. But eventually I would. When they were old enough to understand. When they faced their own workplace politics and power dynamics. They'd need to know that survival is possible. That injustice can be fought with documentation and calm strategy. I thought sometimes about writing a book. About what happened. About corporate scapegoating and how to survive it. But I never did. The story felt too personal. And honestly, I'd moved past it. I didn't want to be defined by the worst thing that almost happened to me. Instead, I mentored quietly. Helped people navigate similar situations. Became known in my industry as someone who understood fraud prevention, not just theoretically, but practically. Someone who'd lived through an attempt and survived. That quiet reputation was worth more than any book could have been. People who needed help found me. People facing similar situations reached out. I helped when I could, gave advice, reviewed evidence, connected them with lawyers when needed. I never charged for this help. It wasn't about money. It was about paying forward what Callahan had done for me. He'd warned me with no expectation of reward. I'd help others the same way. Callahan himself, I never saw or heard from him again after that LinkedIn message. I didn't even know where he ended up. If he was still in corporate world, or had left entirely. If he was alive and well, or had faced his own disasters. But his impact on my life was permanent. One text message. One decision to warn someone. That was all it took to completely change a trajectory. To save a career. Maybe even a life. 10 years later, I sat in my office, a corner office now, with a view and a title and respect I'd earned, and thought about that night. That 3:33 a.m. vibration that woke me from sleep. Everything had changed in those few hours. The trajectory of my entire life shifted. What should have been my destruction became my defining moment. Not because I was destroyed, but because I survived. They tried to bury me, frame me, erase me, make me the villain in their story. But I'd walked into that excavation, picked up those shovels, and exposed the truth instead. No drama.
No teatrix.
Just documentation and calm strategy. The world saw the consequences ripple outward. Executives fired.
Systems changed.
Policies implemented. A whole corporate structure transformed because one person refused to be a convenient scapegoat. I didn't need revenge to scream. It spoke for itself. The girl they tried to destroy became the one who exposed the destruction. The target became the investigator. The scapegoat became the manager. My phone buzzed. A text message. Not 3:33 a.m. this time. Just a normal afternoon. But for a split second, my heart jumped. That trauma response probably never fully leaves. It was just my daughter asking when I'd be home for dinner. I smiled and texted back. Normal life. Safe life. The life I'd fought to keep.
Y de surviva.
They hadn't. That was the whole story. Everything else was just details. And honestly, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.